Good morning, and hey now, PASW staff, clients, friends joining us for a Tuesday class. Welcome. We looked at Vertigo yesterday, your film scoring assignment, so get that into me by today, and we'll see the results for Friday. It's going to be a lot of fun. Today, we'll talk about somebody you've heard of. I don't know why I didn't do him earlier. There's so much information, so many great things about this person, this musician, a true icon, true genius, and we're going to take a look at some of the wonderful things that he's done and contributed to music. I think you'll like it. We're going to look at the genius composer, arranger, Duke Ellington. It's hard to talk about any music that's happened in the 20th century without mentioning Duke Ellington, because his enormous contribution to not just jazz music, but jazz big band music. Okay, so we'll talk about that in a little bit. So 1899 he's born, lives till 75. So okay, long life. He saw a lot of stuff. So he died in 1974. So I mean, if you think of all, Gershwin, the Beatles, he saw a lot of music change. Born in D.C. And his parents were musicians, and he starts playing the piano at age 7, and gets the nickname Duke at a young age because he was a very dapper, gentlemanly figure throughout his whole life, but even as a kid. And of course, we know the famous Stevie Wonder song, Sir Duke, which is about Stevie Wonder. His name was Edward Kennedy, but I think Duke Ellington sounds a little better. So he led his own band for more than half a century, composed thousands of songs and scores, and his ensemble, his band, had such a unique sound. We're gonna look at that sound with Take the A Train in particular. But so you have big band. We have big band music going on in the 20s and 30s. We've talked about Tommy Dorsey, Glenn Miller, Artie Shaw. These people are, white big band leaders. Duke comes along in the 20s, 30s, 40s. He's going to bring in more jazz elements to the big band orchestra. He's creating his own American orchestra. So what do I mean by that? He's seeing, and he's reinventing himself almost every decade. He's really keeping up with new musical. He never really got dated that much. So you have the classical orchestra, and you have Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue in 1924. So you have classical composers working with the orchestra. You have Dixieland and small jazz music and blues music coming out of clubs. He's going to be one of the most important figures, and who did it the best, to say, yes, I'm going to take these elements of the classical orchestra and the jazz band, and I'm going to put them together and make my own orchestra. In a nutshell, that's what he's doing, and that's why he has such a distinctive sound. And his band members were very importantly handpicked. They were important soloists and important musicians in their own right, where they could have, and they did, have their own careers. But he would foster their careers in his band by featuring them, by allowing them to solo longer. With Glenn Miller, you'd have a solo, but maybe it would be short, and that's fine. He would allow more experimentation and improvisation with his band members throughout each decade. And of course, that's why they loved playing with him. And some people had played for him most of that whole, 4 or 5 decades. So he was a really good piano player, and he learned stride piano. We've talked about stride piano and ragtime piano, who was the king of ragtime. We did Scott Joplin class. But remember, Scott Joplin's, he's already dead by the 1920s. So all his early music and early people that jazz musicians would take over. Duke Ellington's coming from that stride piano background, but he's not going to play stride piano. But he starts playing in groups in the 20s and has a long stay at the Cotton Club in Harlem. And in the 20s, he's part of the Harlem Renaissance. And we haven't really touched on that, but you probably know about the Harlem Renaissance, Renaissance means rebirth, and it's a rebirth of culture in New York and Harlem in particular, where he lived. Black composers, artists, and writers. Langston Hughes, a great poet. Those guys created a rebirth in New York, which is really the center of the world. New York City is still almost the center of the world. And when Duke starts his own band in the 20s, he's playing the piano and he's conducting from the piano, but not conducting like a conductor would conduct with a baton. None of that. He's signaling with his fingers, with his eyes, and he's not the only one doing this, but kind of one of the first to conduct at the piano with the orchestra reading their charts. And it's in 1939 he meets somebody really important, Billy Strayhorn. Billy Strayhorn was originally hired as a lyricist, but wrote a lot of the Duke Ellington, songbook, part of the Duke Ellington songbook. Wrote a lot of the songs and did a lot of the orchestrations. It was Duke's sound, but it was mostly Billy Strayhorn's orchestrations and melodies that helped Duke, and Duke gave him immense amount of credit. I mean, he said the two of them were just in sync together with, this is how we want our band to sound like. Duke trusted Billy Strayhorn so much and he would fill in for Duke with his own band as the conductor, as the pianist, as almost a leader, as a co-leader almost. And it's Billy Strayhorn in 1941 that writes the band's, signature song. Like, this is their signature song, which is Take the A Train. Such a fun song. I mean, obviously we know it's about the A train in New York, and let's take a look. So when I said earlier about reinventing the orchestra in a sense, the jazz band, the big band, well, here's one way. We talk about dissonance, and I've talked a lot about dissonance, and that doesn't mean it's necessarily better, but at least to me, dissonance is sometimes more interesting. Now, total dissonance is chaos to me, and no, I'm not saying that. A little dissonance sometimes makes it a little interesting. Maybe it's akin to a little spice somewhere in something you're making, in something you're baking. A little spice makes it a little just bit more interesting. Too much will ruin it, but a little bit, and I'm sure you guys have had this happen to you, where you're listening to something and then something catches you off beat and that's intriguing to you. Maybe it's a lyric, maybe it's not dissonance, but there's something that whoa, there's that whoa moment. So let's look at the first two measures of Take the A Train. It's a C chord. You can't get any more C than that. C chord is C, G, so he's got that already. Nothing different. But by the third measure, what do you see? You see the G sharp. The G sharp is a sharp 11 chord. So they spell it D7 flat 5. I won't get into the spelling. Really, a flat 5 would be an A flat, because 5, the fifth of in a D chord is A, and flat means to go down, so it would be A flat. But here, just because it's written everywhere like this, it's a G sharp, which is the same as A flat. Listen to it. Would it be the same if it sounded like this? This is if it wasn't the A flat. If you see a C chord and you see a D chord, you're not going to do A flat, you're going to do A. But he's actually going to do A flat or G sharp. That's what makes it different already. And for 1941, these kind of new color tones in music in the jazz orchestra are becoming really interesting now. We're not just doing stacked thirds and tertian harmony. Now we're doing more dissonant, chromatic, chordal harmony. You know, I mean, like that G sharp in there is really cool, man. So it resolves to A in the fifth measure, but it wouldn't have been as interesting if it was just A in the third measure, because what would you do in the fifth measure? You don't want to do an A again. So this little G sharp is very representative of altered thinking, altered writing that Billy Strayhorn and Duke Ellington came up with. It's that little note. It's those little things that I think, in my opinion, make something brilliant instead of just, lack of a better word, common. There's a little flavor and harmony lesson on Duke Ellington, and just a very simple example of, you know, I mean, just take a listen to this chord right here. Such a great chord. It's confusing what kind of chord that could be interpreted many different ways. And take a listen to this chord. So he's making the big band sound different, and it sounds new, and it sounds modern, and it sounds harmonically interesting because it's dissonant, but it's also it's not as predictable as we would think it would be. And so there's that slight little thing that's a little off in there. A spice. We'll go with that analogy for this class. There's a little spice. It's a little bit of a punch that's different, and it's still so musical today. One of his famous songs is "Don't Mean a Thing If It Ain't Got That Swing." You've probably heard that expression. Maybe you've heard the song. That's a great quote for life. This was something that Duke Ellington was very kind of famous for, and it's not good if it doesn't swing. So what do I mean by that? At least for me, music's got to swing, and that doesn't mean it has to be jazz music or big band music. You can have Mozart or Rossini or even the Beatles, where there's something that's grooving in your head. There's something that's swinging. There's something that feels right, where there's the movement of, and it doesn't even have to be fast. I mean, listen to Mood Indigo. This isn't fast at all. But it swings. There's something in it that's exciting, even if it's subtle. So make sure you're swinging a little in life. You know, take that appropriately. There's rhythm in our footsteps, like we talk about that, right? Just we walk with rhythm. Make your life swing a little bit, okay? And I'm going to do that today too. Don't go crazy, but make sure you're always swinging a little bit. So that's your assignment today and for the rest of the week. Go about your life, but swing a little bit in it. Have fun. Mix it up just a little bit. Follow the rules, but you can swing the rules a little bit too. What do you think? Yeah, I like it. Okay. Said it all. Love you, miss you, and you know, let's have a swinging week.